Welcome to the Healing Courageously podcast, where we engage in open, honest, and healthy conversation about everything from addiction, abuse, and recovery to marriage, family, and spirituality. We hope you find this podcast helpful. Our goal is that you will find a new way of living as you look closer at yourself in these areas of your life, which will lead to a happier and healthier you. Now here's your host, Randy Boyd.
Greetings, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Healing Courageously. Well, this month is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. National Child Abuse Prevention Month. So, for the remainder of this month, every Monday we'll be releasing a podcast that's going to be around the subject of Child Abuse Prevention Month. So, and it just happens to be one of my favorite topics because I grew up as a thriving abuse survivor, and so this really hits home with me. And I started a foundation, the Courageous Healers Foundation, as a result of it. Now my foundation does stem mostly around the sexual abuse of men and also of women and the healing for those men. However, my abuse consisted of sexual, physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse. So we'll be touching on a little bit of all that over the course of the next month, what it is, statistics, and so on and so forth. So let's start off by talking about what is abuse. What is abuse? Okay. And the definition of abuse, right? Abuse of any type occurs when someone has power over another and uses that power to hurt. Physical abuse means that someone exercises physical power over another, causing physical wounds. Sexual abuse means that someone exercises sexual power over another, resulting in sexual wounds. And spiritual abuse happens when a leader with spiritual authority uses the authority to coerce, control, or exploit a follower, thus causing spiritual wounds. Now that's one type of spiritual abuse, and I'm going to touch on the second type here in just a second. Remember, you got to remember this, that abuse has nothing to do with sex or physical or spirits. It all has to do with power over their victims. That's all. It's all about power. When you think about sexual abuse, it has nothing to do with sex. It's all about having power over their victims to control them. Same thing with spiritual. Same thing with physical or emotional. It's all about exerting their power over another individual so they can control them in some way, fashion, or form. When we talk about spiritual abuse, there's the two types. The one was what I just explained. Spiritual abuse happens when a leader with a spiritual authority uses the authority to coerce, control, or exploit a follower, thus causing spiritual wounds. Now, that authority doesn't have to be a pastor. It could be a pastor, a youth pastor. It could be a father, a mother, a grandmother, a grandfather, uncle, an aunt, a teacher, a brother, a sister. Anybody that exerts their power over another human being to control them is causing abuse. Okay, it's causing abuse. The second type, and I think this is probably the most damaging, is the minute that we're abused, the spirit of the child within us is assassinated. And most perpetrators will tell you, when you ask, what did I do to the perpetrator, besides whatever they did physically, is they assassinated their character. So the minute that we're abused, the child's spirit has been assassinated. And in most cases, not all, but in most cases, that child will likely never be the same again. Now, does that mean for the rest of their life they'll never be the same again? No. If they get the proper help, it won't. There's children that get help right away, and those children can go on to have a healthy life. There's a lot of people like myself that continually were abused for. My mind started when I was 12 and then it ended when I was 17. Just the sexual abuse and the emotional abuse, but the physical abuse and thus the emotional abuse and thus the spiritual abuse probably continued until I was 20, until I finally just cut myself off from my stepfather and my mother so I wouldn't have to continue getting that abuse. So just because somebody was abused doesn't mean they're going to have a terrible life. There is hope. There's possibility that that child, if they get help at a young age, can have a pretty healthy life. Even people like me, I was 49 when I started my recovery journey, I was able to get help and turn my life around, do a 180-degree spin on my life, where I'm no longer playing a victim role. Now, does that mean that every day I'm okay? No, I mean, I'm a human being just like everybody else, and life has its ups and downs, and the difference is that I just meet life on life's terms. It's that simple, and I don't use anything to mask it. I talk about my feelings and I talk about my emotions, but I had to learn how to do that. How did I learn how to do that? With mentors that loved me, taught me how to be a good father and a good husband, which I thought I was. And for the most part, my kids will tell you, Dad, you're a great father. You just, have some issues going on in your life for a period of time. And then there's a lot of work that we have to do. Okay, so those are the two types of spiritual abuse, and the first one is probably the most damaging. The other one was somebody uses their spiritual authority over you. That can be overcome, I believe, fairly easy if you address it sooner than later. And I'll be honest with you, that abuse is probably my deepest scar that I have because I waited 38 years to start addressing it, and I deal with it almost on a weekly, daily basis today, working through the issues that caused. Okay, so let's talk about some statistics, and you can go to my website, courageoushealers.org, or I can send you the PowerPoint that this is all derived from. So all my statistics all come from different sources. So the United States has one of the worst records among industrialized nations, losing an average of 5 children every day to child abuse and neglect. Losing means dead. 5 children every day, an average of 5 children every day. In 2020, there were about 618,399 victims of child abuse in the United States. In that year, about 297,352 boys were abused across the country. Additionally, 319,230 girls were the victims of child abuse in that same year. That's a lot of kids. And if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, well, 300 million people, 319,000, it's still a lot of people, still a lot of kids. Some people might say, well, it's just a drop in the bucket. Well, if one child is suffering, that's one too many. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for any child to be abused or neglected in any way, especially in the free world of America, let alone the rest of the world. Okay? In 2020, the child abuse rate for children aged less than 1 year old stood at 25 to 1, indicating that 25.1 out of every 1,000 newborn children in the United States were victims of child maltreatment. That's sad. Again, I don't care if it's 1, it's too many. But 25.1 out of every 1,000 newborn children in the United States were victims of child maltreatment. The defenseless child that was born into this world wasn't his choice, her choice, has been maltreated. This was the highest rate of child abuse among all age groups in that year. It decreased to 11.2 per 1,000 by the age of 1 year old, and then by the age of 17, it decreased to 3.6 per 1,000. So it steadily goes down according to the statistic I got. All these statistics were published by Statista Research Department, January 26, 2022. Okay. According to Dr. Vincent Iannelli, MD, 9.2 in every one. Oh, I'm sorry. That's something that shouldn't have been there. I already talked about that. I apologize. Approximately 70% of children that die from abuse are under the age of 4. 70% of the children that die from abuse are under the age of 4. That is sad. That's a lot of children. 70%. And that's according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. About 30% of abused and neglected children will later abuse their own children, continuing the cycle of violence. 30%. That's a scary number. All right, and I can tell you this, all the time I hear people, with perpetrators, and maybe there's something on social media, maybe there's something on whatever it is, and the comments that come out of people, well, just kill them, they deserve to die. There's so much hate going out. And I would go out on a limb and say that those people that are talking that much hate have probably been abused themselves. And the only way they know how to release their anger is at another perpetrator and wishing them dead. You got to remember that hurt people hurt people. And if you're in any way a Christian, in any way, whether it's Catholic, Mormon, whatever it is, right? You got to forgive people. And I know, I've heard it 1,000 times, Randy, you're crazy. How can you forgive anybody that would do that to you? Well, for 38 years, I didn't. And what made my life better was the day that I fully forgave my mother and my stepfather. Fully forgave them. Held no more resentment, no more anger. For 38 years on a daily basis, I plotted my stepfather's assassination in my head. That went away. So those that are continuing the violence have those that are continuing the violence have more than likely 30% of them have been abused themselves, whether it's sexual, physical, emotional, or spiritual. Why? Learned behavior. And they've had nobody along the course of their life to say, hey, you might want to look at what you're doing and the harm you're causing other people, because it's not right. What was done to me? Well, I understand that. It was done to me too, but I didn't go out perpetrating the same stuff on my kids and family and friends. So we have to, everything that happens to us, everything we go through in life is either a lesson, right? Or we gotta learn from it. What are we gonna learn from it? Good, bad, or indifferent? One of the biggest lessons I learned from people that treated me like crap, and employers that didn't treat employees good, was what not to do, what not to be. Every person we run across, whether for a minute, a day, a month, whenever, however long, is a teacher, and everything that happens to us is a lesson. What are you going to take away from it? Worldwide, approximately 40 million children below the age of 15, are subjected to child abuse each year. 40 million children are subjected to child abuse each year. That's astounding. That's a lot of kids. And that's all sorts of abuse, from the spiritual abuse, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. That's a lot of kids. Studies from many countries in all regions of the world suggest that up to 80 to 98% of children suffer physical punishment in their own homes, with a third or more experiencing severe punishment resulting from the use of implements. And God only knows what kind of implements people can use. There's some sick people out there. That comes from the World Health Organization in 2001. Physical violence is often accompanied by psychological violence. Of course it is. Insults, name calling, isolation, rejection, threats, emotional indifference, and belittling are all forms of violence that can be detrimental to a child's well-being, especially when it comes from a respected adult such as a parent. That's from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization in 2005. So all this abuse has detrimental and long-lasting effects on children, especially if it's a continual cycle of abuse. One time, some people make mistakes and they might call their kid a name one time and say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry," and it's never repeated again. They actually show them that they're not whatever they called that child. So it's a lot of it depends on the continued behavior or does the abuse continue or does it not continue? Emotional abuse may be more devastating than physical abuse, and I know this for a fact. A child's physical cuts and bruises usually heal quickly, but the emotional cuts and bruises take a long time to heal. Emotional abuse is very difficult for the victim to recognize. If it is occurring on a day-to-day basis, you may see it as normal behavior. That's the International Center for Assault Prevention Teen CAP manual. So if you're living in it, you just think it's normal behavior. You think you're being picked on, that this happens in every family. You won't see it as any kind of abuse. But the reality is emotional abuse will tear you apart. It tears at your heart. It tears at the soul of who you are. It tears at that spirit child within inside of you that's already been assassinated, and it just keeps on getting assassinated. So if you're out there, well, I'm just telling him he's stupid. He should be smarter than that. Those are vile words to be telling a child. Right? No child is stupid. They just probably need a little bit of help, and that's okay. Maybe you were called stupid growing up all the time. That doesn't mean it's okay to call your child stupid. It's like they say, 30% of perpetrators or 30% of survivors, they'll go on to 30% of abused and neglected children will later abuse their own children. Learn behavior. Doesn't mean it's all right. I had an example with a guy in our treatment center one time, and he was saying, "Well, my dad beat me and called me names and blah, 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 and I'm okay." I go, really? I go, let me see. You just got out of a 2-year stint in prison. You're in a drug rehab facility. You want to maybe rethink what you just said? And he was willing to take a little walk with me through time, and he ended up sinking in his chair because it come down to, how did you feel when your dad was treating you like that? And he sunk in his chair. I said, "Now, do you want your children to feel that way?" And no, he was sad. It woke him up. So now what I want to do is I want to talk about sexual abuse. No one wants to either talk about it or acknowledge that it even happens, right? And this is pretty much the truth. Don't say nothing. Push underneath the rug. We don't want to disturb the family dynamic here. Don't say nothing. Uncle Johnny's such a he might be on a city council, or he might be a police chief, or he might be a fire chief, or he might be this, or he might be that, or he might be a pastor. Don't say nothing. So here's the statistics, and I will say this about sexual abuse statistics. This is what I really love to do, is work with and educate people on this, and it's part of this Prevent Child Abuse Month. These statistics I found have been all over the map, and there's really no very current statistics. I'm going to quote a bunch, and then what I've seen out there is, I will say what I've seen personally in the work I do, it's 1 in 2, 50% of almost every man and woman have been sexually abused before the age of 18. But I'll go over what the statistics say. I'll show you. According to the Lisa Project in 2010, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. That's a lot of kids before the age of 18. According to an organization called 1in6.org, they say that 1 in 6 boys before the age of 18 are sexually abused. Okay, so there's two contradictory right off the bat. And that's from Jim Hopper, and that comes from a statistic taken back in 1996, and Jim Hopper, PhD, Sexual Abuse of Males. That's his book. A study released in 2005 by Johnson et al. found that 59%, 1 in 1.7 of their samples had been sexually abused. 100% of abuse victims had reported some use of drugs. Johnson et al. Did a study in a San Antonio County jail, and they wanted to see how many of a population of sexually abused men, they asked children, not that they were sexually abused in prison, but sexually abused as children, what the correlation was between that and between actual drug use. And 1 in 1.17. So 59% out of 100 men. They had 100 men and 59%. All right, and that's the men that would say they've been sexually abused. There's probably a lot more that aren't saying they were sexually abused. Less than 10% of child sexual abuse is even reported to the police, and that's according to the Megan Law and Crime Victim Center. So just imagine, let's just use 1 in 6, just for an average, okay? I know it's way more than that. That's with only 10%. That's all they know. Only 10% of the cases are reported. So you can imagine the amount of people that are being sexually abused. 80% of men that have been sexually abused have a substance abuse history, as reported by the Mental Health Association in New York State Incorporated. And then children are most vulnerable between the ages of 8 and 12. And mine happened when I was 12. And that's because that's a very influential time in their life. There's a lot going on, a lot of changes biologically happen in their life. You want to know more about my story, go to courageoushealers.org, and I got my stories there on the front page, on the front of it, along with several other stories. And that comes from Megan's Law and Crime Victim Center. Okay, so who are the perps? All right, who are the perps? And this, again, I'm talking about sexual abuse. 93% of juvenile sexual assault victims know their perpetrator. 93% know them. 34.2% of perpetrators were family members and 58.7% were acquaintances. And only 7% were strangers to the victim. And that comes from Megan's Law. Lost my place here. Megan's Law and Crime Victim Center. Offenders were overwhelmingly male, ranging in age from adolescent to elderly. National Center of Crime for Crime of Victims. Okay. Overwhelming male, ranging in age from adolescents to elderly. Okay. Nearly 70% of child sex offenders have between 1 and 9 victims, and at least 20% have 10 to 40 victims. 1 victim's too many. 1 to 9 is definitely too many, and anything above that's just absolutely unacceptable. Well, it's all unacceptable, right? Have 10 to 40 victims, and that comes from what offenders tell us: child abuse and neglect. From Elliott M. Brown and Kilcoyne J. 1995. An average serial molester may have as many as 400 victims in his lifetime. So if you go back to the first statistic I gave you, 93% of juvenile assault victims know the perpetrator. I hope you know who you're leaving your children with. I hope you really know them well. Okay, and because 93% is a big number. And this is the one that gets people. It is estimated that women are the abusers in about 14% of cases reported. A lot of people don't believe that women can be molesters or they can be the perps, but they can. And I've listened to men that have been abused by women as kids, and it's devastating what it's done to them. You wonder why so many men hate women? Here's one of the reasons. One of the reasons. And most men who molest little boys, now for those of you who are out there saying they're gay, and believe me, I've had guys sit there and insist the only way they're going to molest people is if they're gay. They're gay. They're gay. They're not gay, right? Most men who molest little boys are not gay. Only 21% of child molesters that were studied who assault little boys were exclusively homosexual. Only 21%. Nearly 80% of the men who molested little boys, check this out, were heterosexual or bisexual, and most of these men were married and have children of their own. All right? So you kind of get over this false belief that just because they molest somebody, it means that they're gay. It has nothing to do with sex. You've got to understand that. It's all about having power. All about power, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual or sexual. It's all about having power over that victim as a way to coerce them into doing what they want when they want them to do it. It's scary. It's why women have a hard time getting in healthy relationships. It's why men have a hard time staying in healthy relationships. It's probably one of the biggest causes of marriage failures, unaddressed, unresolved childhood traumas like this. We carry it into our future, and as we carry it, because we develop these innate survival skills. I believe God gives us these innate survival skills that we learn as a young child, and they work. That's how we protect ourselves the best we can. And as we grow older, those skills, survival skills, get honed, and they get better. Well, they get better, but by getting better, it makes us worse. So we have to find a way to not be pushing this stuff underneath the rug. Look for the signs. If you go to my website, courageoushears.org, I believe I have a page on there. It's got all the signs of to look for that is a strong possibility that a child is being abused in some way, shape, or form. It's not 100% that they are, but it's a definite thing that you need to look at. Let's as America, let's quit talking about all the problems without coming up with a solution for it, a viable solution that we're going to follow through with, right? And we're going to start helping these kids get the help that they need. One thing that I'm really tired of is we have to talk about the issues. We have to talk about the problems. I understand that. But let's not talk about them unless we're going to talk about the solution. I mean, that's just the way I see it. That's the way of America. Well, we got all these issues, so we'll talk about them, and then we'll do nothing about it. We need to start doing stuff about it. Start becoming proactive. Believe me, I understand how hard it is to get this a point across. I've been doing this for 10 years now, 11 years now. This isn't easy to talk about, let alone not having somebody, to say, hey, let's do this together. Let's really put a push on this, right? I don't have a political agenda. I have a human agenda. I want to see people get healthy and get better. That's my number one. I want them to have. I didn't think that I could ever have a good life. I was in such a dark hole, such a dark state of mind when I entered treatment in 2006. How is this gonna work? How am I ever gonna become a better person? How am I ever gonna be free of all this stuff that's got me so bonded up in a dark world? Yeah, I was successful. It was the facade I had. So when you saw me, all you saw was success. But you didn't see the pain I was carrying underneath. How many people do you know that are doing that? I guarantee you more than you'd think. So go to my website, courageoushealers.org. There's some information on there. You can also get my book, Healing the Wounded Child Within, on Amazon. That's in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. My 30-day devotion of the wholeness is in Kindle and paperback, and my 7-day challenge is in paperback. And they are all on Amazon. You can get them directly there. And I believe there's a link on my website as well to go to take you right to Amazon, So I'm going to continue these conversations. Each week will be a different subject around the Prevent Child Abuse Month. Just helping you to understand, to educate you what it is, how it affects people, and how we can heal from it. It's really important that, like I say, I'm saying, let's not talk about it unless we have a solution, but I want to talk about the solution. In my book, that Healing the Wounded Child Within, it's my story, but it's a book of hope and healing. It's not. I've read a lot of books on sexual abuse, and I have to put them down because they trigger me, and I can't. I mean, they're really dark, and that's all it is. So my book, Healing the Wounded Child Within, talks about hope and healing in there. And there's several chapters. There's 13 chapters, and just different subjects, different things I had gone through and how I had to walk through them. Okay? And I'm right now in the process of putting on paper to write another book to how do we really heal. Okay? So I hope to catch you on the next episode. Again, for this next month, they're going to be all around the child abuse prevention. There's going to be a couple bonuses thrown in there that I had planned anyways, but every Monday you can catch us here about the child abuse. Okay? So remember, if nobody tells you they love you today, remember that Randy does. And more importantly, God does. Be blessed, everybody, and have a great day, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're at in the world listening to this. Love y'all. Be good.
This has been Healing Courageously with Randy Boyd. We will have a new episode every Monday. Please like us on iTunes or Google Play. If you would like to know more about the services available from Randy, please visit him at changeyourlifestorynow.com. Thank you for spending time with us. We'll see you next week. And remember, if nobody tells you they love you today, Randy does.